Yo, what's going on guys? Zack here, bringing you guys another video, and today I want to talk about some more One Piece. So as you guys know, if you've watched my videos before, One Piece is my favorite manga series of all time. If you know anything about One Piece, then you know that it's extremely long, and there's a chance that a long story is going to have a lot of characters. One Piece is one of those stories that has a lot of characters, and I feel like some of them get overlooked because of their roles in the story. I wanted to shine some light on some of these characters, so that's why I'm here today to talk about some obscure One Piece characters. Now these guys are at least going to play some role in the story. I'm not just going to talk about background character number 75, but these characters may have slipped your mind as the story goes on. I just really enjoy this story, so I think that this will be a good test of my One Piece knowledge, and your guys's as well. With that being said, let me know how many of these characters you remember down in the comments section below, and let's hop into our first character. Our first character comes from the Water 7 arc, and was introduced while Sanji, Franky, and Soge King were making their ways through the sea train. He was a new recruit within CP9 and only had mastery over 4 of the 6 Rokushiki techniques, but he was still really powerful for the time. This was shown in a fight against Franky that he lost, and after his loss, Lucci decided that he wasn't worthy of joining CP9, so he beat him off of the sea train. That's an insane sentence, I cannot believe I wrote that. Now this guy is somebody that most One Piece fans would probably know if they saw, but I still see him as an obscure character because of how little he actually appeared in the story, and because of the fact that we haven't heard anything about him since. He's got a surprisingly cool design for a character so small in the grand scheme of things, and his depiction in the manga is a lot more cat-like than his depiction in the anime. In all honesty, I thought that Lucci killed him when he kicked him out of CP9, but the man has a post-time skip age on the One Piece wiki, so I'm gonna assume that he's still alive. We'll probably never hear from him again, but he is the reason that we got to see Centaur Franky, so I thought that he deserved a mention in this video. His name is Nero, and I would be really surprised if we ever see him again, but he is still out there lurking somewhere in the One Piece world. Our next character gets introduced to us during the post-Marineford arc, and is a really important character that operates in the background for Marines and the world government. This guy right here is named Kong, and is the current commander-in-chief for the world government. He was also the fleet admiral before Sengoku, who obviously gave up his seat to Akainu. He also appears in Chapter 0, which was released for the Strong World movie, and is canon to the story. Only the chapter itself is canon, and Shiki is still out there in the One Piece world waiting to strike, but getting back to Kong, he doesn't really play a huge role in this chapter. He kinda just yells at Garp and just lets both Garp and Sengoku fight Shiki before they haul him off to Impel Down. This guy being the commander-in-chief also puts him pretty high on the world government hierarchy, second only to Eam and the 5 Elders. There also isn't too much known about Kong's history. The only thing we learn about is the stuff that we learn in Chapter 0. When it comes to hockey, this guy can at least use armament and observation, but I wouldn't be surprised if he could use conquerors because the former fleet admiral Sengoku could. People that like to speculate about the strongest characters in the series definitely know who this guy is, but if you don't argue about the power of fictional characters all day, I think it's pretty easy to forget that this guy is doing important stuff in the background. Next up is another fun character because this story has Blackbeard, it has Whitebeard, and it also has this guy who's named Brownbeard. Brownbeard actually plays a decently sized role during the Punk Hazard arc as he helps the Straw Hats and friends take down Caesar, but he was actually introduced in the post-Marineford arc. He's first seen trying to take over a territory that used to belong to Whitebeard, claiming that Food Vulcan Island is now under his protection. He actually has an 80 million berry bounty, but his time in the spotlight quickly came to an end when he got confronted by Basil Hawkins. Hawkins obviously defeated him and cut his legs off, and this caused him to go to Punk Hazard with a ton of other paraplegics. Law then gave him the legs of the alligator that we see him have during Punk Hazard, and this leads to his appearance in that arc. This guy was kinda just a comic relief character during Punk Hazard, but he does have a pretty emotional storyline as he learns that Caesar was just using him all along. It is pretty obvious that he's a big ripoff of both Blackbeard and Whitebeard, but he does look pretty cool with his alligator legs. He's also of course still alive, but since he was a pirate, the Marines ended up taking him to jail after the events of Punk Hazard. Next up is another guy from the Water 7 saga, specifically the Enies Lobby arc, and it's this 3-headed man right here. This guy's name is Baskerville, and he's actually the Chief Justice of Enies Lobby. It really seems like this is the strangest 3-headed man, but he's actually way stranger than that because this guy is 3 separate men. These guys decided to wake up in the morning and all live out the day under the same outfit, and their names are Bass and Kerville. Not only are they strange, their names are strange, and this and guy's parents must not have wanted him if that's his name. Really weird, and you also wouldn't think that these guys would be very powerful, but they were powerful enough for Zoro to think that he had to stay back to fight them. Once again, this guy doesn't really play a major role in the story at all, but his crazy ass design, and the fact that it's actually 3 separate people in there really made me want to mention him in this video. Our next character comes in the form of a mermaid fishman that we met during the Fishman Island arc. This character is another one that's pretty important to the arc that they're introduced in, but after that arc is over, we don't really hear about them that much. This character is a fortune teller and just so happens to be Arlong's half-sister, her name being Shyarly. This lady's fortunes are actually extremely accurate, as she predicted the outcome of the Marineford War and the fact that Whitebeard was gonna die in the conflict. She also made a prediction that a man in a straw hat, who's obviously Luffy, is gonna destroy Fishman Island sometime in the future. There are actually some people that this prediction could fit other than Luffy, and the destruction of Fishman Island could even be a good thing, but let's talk about Shyarly a little bit more before we start talking about that. Shyarly is also the boss of the Mermaid Cafe, the place that Kami works at, and the place that caused Sanji to almost die due to a nosebleed, and she didn't really enjoy it when Luffy asked her if she pooped. She's also a highly respected person within Fishman Island because of her fortune-telling abilities, and we even saw her in the Odin flashback in the anime where she predicted when Shirahoshi was gonna be born. She also sees her fortune-telling abilities as a burden because she usually only gets visions of bad things, so that's why she doesn't use her abilities very often. So now that we've gone over Shyarly a little bit more, let's talk about some theories regarding her prediction about the man in a straw hat that's gonna destroy Fishman Island. There are a few different ways that you could approach this, and this is how. 1. Luffy is straight up gonna destroy Fishman Island for a reason that we don't know of yet. This is the most unlikely outcome. And 2. Fishman Island getting destroyed is actually a good thing and has something to do with the One Piece and reuniting the One Piece world. And 3. Luffy isn't the man in the straw hat that destroys Fishman Island, but it's somebody else that's probably a lot more evil. Now I can only really see the first version of this theory happening if somebody like Jinbei tells Luffy that Fishman Island must be destroyed. That being said, Luffy didn't listen to Jinbei when he wanted him to play the role of the hero during the Fishman Island arc, so I don't know if that would be enough. This is something that probably isn't gonna happen, but I still feel like there's a super outside chance that this might happen, so I thought I would mention it. The second version of this theory relies on a very popular theory about what the One Piece is, and what its role is in the One Piece world. This theory says that the One Piece comes together with the 3 ancient weapons, those being Pluton, Poseidon, and Uranus, to form something that destroys the Red Line and brings the entire One Piece world together, and creates things like the All Blue Sea. Now that's a super SparkNotes version of the theory, and I'll probably link a video in the description from a different person that explains it way better than I can at the moment. That being said, Fishman Island being destroyed this way would obviously be a good thing, and probably help Luffy achieve his true goal, which comes after he becomes the king of the pirates. There's a ton of speculation that can be done with this theory, and it would benefit the fishmen of Fishman Island because they would be able to live with everybody else like they've always wanted to. Now the third theory is something that's just kinda some fun, and stems from the giant straw hat that we saw Im-sama has during the Reverie arc. Now the Reverie arc still has a ton of mysteries and revelations that are going to be important to the story moving forward, but nothing was more mysterious than the giant straw hat that Im-sama has. We also just saw Im-sama destroy an island with the mysterious powers that they have, so I wouldn't put anything past them at this point. There's a possibility that the straw hat is a weapon of some sort, or something that Im-sama somehow puts on whenever they want to alter the history of the One Piece world. So if the destruction of Fishman Island doesn't come for a good reason, I can totally see it coming because of something that Im-sama does with their weird giant straw hat. Now that was a lot of rambling that stemmed from a single character, but I thought that it was a lot of fun. Now our next character once again comes from after the time skip, but they were introduced a lot later than Fishman Island. This guy is actually a big part of the Big Mom Pirates, but we don't see him much during the Whole Cake Island arc because he got defeated prior. This guy is the former 4th member of the Sweet Generals, and his name is Charlotte Snack. Now we already know the other 3 Sweet Generals, Smoothie, Cracker, and Katakuri, but this guy was once a member too. This was until he got defeated by a member of the worst generation named Arouge during the time skip. This is actually a crazy feat for Arouge, who we haven't seen since the Saboti arc where he was fighting off a pacifista. Now this guy being a member of the Sweet Generals obviously means that he's extremely powerful. It took Luffy 2 extreme diff fights against both Cracker and Katakuri for him to win, and Luffy even had to unlock a whole new level of observation haki in order to defeat Katakuri. Not quite sure why he lost his spot in the Sweet Generals after his loss, but I'm guessing that it's because he lost. Now I'm sure the Big Mom didn't take Katakuri or Cracker out of the Sweet Generals because of their losses, so that might just be a little bit of favoritism on the side of Big Mom. He also obviously hates the members of the Worst Generation because of his loss to Arouge, so this is the last guy that I thought would have something in common with Cavendish. I actually wanted to see more of this guy during the Whole Cake Island arc, but I wouldn't be surprised if he comes out and surprises people by doing damage in another arc. Now our next set of characters is actually a duo that we met during the East Blue Saga that you could easily forget if you didn't pay attention to the cover stories. One of them was a big part of Captain Kuro's crew, and another was the lieutenant that Sanji kicked the crap out of at the beginning of the Barity arc. That's right, we're talking about the simp duo, Jango and Fullbody. Now these guys respectively didn't do much in the arcs that they were introduced in. I mean, Jango did make the Meow Band brothers a little bit stronger for their fight against Zoro, but they still got taken out pretty easily in the end. Fullbody was also the reason that Don Krieg was even able to attack the Baratier, but he didn't do much else in the arc other than that. So you would think that that would be the end of these two in the story, but then you see this picture right here of the two of them as Marines under Hina, and you wonder how this would ever happen. Well, it happened through the ingenious thing that Oda does as he tells small stories about the One Piece world through his cover pages. The most famous of these cover pages are definitely the one about Buggy regaining himself after his fight against Luffy, and the one about Kobe and Helmeppo starting their training with Garp, but that's only because they got their own episodes towards the beginning of the anime. I don't really know why they stopped animating the cover stories, but there are way more than the two that got animated. This one happens from chapters 126 through 172 and is called Jango's Dance Paradise. In this cover story, Fullbody and Jango meet each other after Jango escapes the Kuro pirates, and Fullbody has been demoted because of his actions during the Baratier arc. These guys basically become really great friends on some island on the One Piece world, and even fight off some pirates together. That being said, it isn't possible for the two of them to continue being friends after Fullbody learns that Jango is a pirate, but that's when the script gets flipped on its head. That's because with the support of Fullbody and some other Marines that Jango made friends with along the way, Jango beats his charges of piracy and gains the ability to join the Marines. Jango and Fullbody then see Hina, fall in love immediately, and join her squad, which is where they are to this very day. In all honesty, I never expected to see these guys again, but it's also nice to see early characters still play a role in the story, no matter how small it is. With that being said, I think it's time for me to end my video about important forgettable One Piece characters here. There are obviously more, and if you guys want to talk about some that I missed, definitely let me know down in the comment section below. I'd love to talk about them with you guys. Let me know what you guys think about this type of video down in the comments as well, because I can definitely make more like it in the future. Please join me next time for whatever I post next. Please leave a like and maybe subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.